You should be able to diagnose an adult, I imagine, but generally speaking, it's a pediatric diagnosis, and some people will grow out of it. So there's certain things that you can do to help train people as well as they can kind of grow out of it. I got to open up different chats because this chat is scrolling too much. Give me a second, chat. Okay, let's talk a little bit more. So a lot of people are asking questions about, what they should do about anger. So one of the questions is, how do you help someone understand that they're the victim of abuse? So generally speaking, the reason it's hard for people to realize that they're victims of abuse has a number of different... So people don't realize they're victims of abuse for a number of different reasons. The first is the gradual nature of abuse. So generally speaking, people don't start out being overtly abusive. What abusers sort of learn is this series of testing limits, right? So first I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. It's kind of this principle of if you boil a frog, right? So you put it in cold water, you slowly turn up the temperature. And if the rate of change is gradual enough, then people won't rebel. Other great examples of this are the way that subscription-based services increase their price by small hikes until they hit the threshold of cancellation. Same principle. Human beings respond to large changes, not small changes. Second thing that a lot of people really, really, really don't realize is that victims of abuse don't see the person that you see. When you look from the outside, you see someone who's just abusive. The problem with victims of abuse is that they see the perfect partner half the time. So there's the terrible partner, and then there's the perfect partner. And then it becomes a game of, okay, what can I do to help the perfect partner be there instead of the abusive partner? So leaving an abusive partner is easy, but leaving the perfect partner is hard. And then this is what abusers do. They tie their behavior to the other person's behavior. Why am I being abusive to you today? Because you did this. There's a brutal episode of South Park, which blows my mind that it's able to air, but why do you make me hit you? And so there's more to this that we can get into. I'll make a video about it, but there's this whole idea that is in the victim's mind that if I behave a certain way, I get the perfect person. If I don't behave in a way, I get the imperfect person. Now, the last thing is that oftentimes the reason they don't see the abuse is because they believe they deserve it. So people who were abused as children are more likely to get abused as adults. So there's a certain normalization to the behavior. This is something that I know how to deal with. It's familiar. I can survive. It's maybe not that bad. And since I have low self-esteem, it makes it easier for me to tolerate, right? So if I have low self-esteem and I get beat up, I deserved it. They don't think that there's something wrong with the abuse sometimes. Now, oftentimes, what happens is if you try to explain to them, hey, this is abuse, you'll run up into a pile of defense mechanisms. They'll defend their partner. They'll say, oh, yeah, it's not that bad. You don't see the good parts of him. They'll say all of these things. So I think oftentimes what we have to do is first listen, right? Really listen. So the way to disarm those defense mechanisms is not to attack. It's to create a vacuum where they can just share whatever is going on. Try to be supportive of them. And I've seen this so many times with patients of mine who have people in their lives who have a partner who's alcoholic. You try to tell them, hey, this person is an alcoholic, and the person that you're talking to doesn't want to hear it. So you have to really just listen and be compassionate and create a lot of what I would say negative space. So be there and receive what comes out. So at the beginning, you'll get the rationalizations. At the beginning, you'll get the defense mechanisms, but they won't be there forever. So you all got to understand this. Someone who is staying with an abusive partner is internally conflicted. So then once the defense mechanisms come out, then the stuff that you agree with will come out. Then they'll start to say, maybe this isn't okay. This person, I don't like it when they do this. Yeah, it's really unfortunate when they do that. That's really not fair to you. That's when you support. right? So when they start to move in a particular direction, you can encourage them. But if you try to push them, they're going to dig their heels in. Hey y'all, just a reminder that in addition to these awesome videos, we have a ton of tools and resources to help you grow and overcome the challenges that you face. We've got things like Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health, personalized coaching programs, and things like free community events and other sorts of tools to help you no matter where you are on your mental health journey. So check out the link in the description below and back to the video. Okay, there's a comment about demonizing men. So the majority of research shows that physical violence is more often perpetrated by men. Now, this is where we have to be a little bit careful because there are all kinds of associations that come with that. So you can say men are to blame, which is like sort of true. But I think this is where the real problem is that we treat men differently in one important way. So if you look at a systemic problem, most of the cases of systemic problems involve systemic solutions. So if we see there are not a whole lot of women in STEM, then we say this is a systems problem. We don't blame the women. We don't say you're not doing a good enough job, you're not studying hard enough. We say, hey, this is a problem of the system. People don't treat women well in STEM. Fair enough. They're discouraged from participating in STEM-based activities. They get harassed if they're majoring in computer engineering. Like, we say that there's the system problem, right? So when there's a class of people who has some kind of struggle, we say that the system is to blame. What really separates men is that when men as a class are not doing well, we tend to blame the men. So men have skyrocketing unemployment rates. They have lower rates of graduation. They are more physically violent. That is true. But then what is our intervention? Are we making a systems-based intervention to fix this problem? And fix this problem usually means adjusting things on the system side and helping the people, right? So one of my patients, awesome, decided to have a couple of kids and left investment banking. And super cool, they joined a bank that had a specific program to help mothers reintegrate. So the cost of having a child for your professional career is profound. People don't really realize how many hundreds of thousands of dollars having a child costs in terms of your professional earnings, right? So if you look at the curve of how you earn money, the longer into your career you are, the more you earn. And generally, it starts to plateau out at some point, but there's like this ramp-up phase. So if you delay your ramp-up phase, it really is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this bank did an awesome job. They're like, okay, if you decided to have a couple kids and you want to come back into banking, we have an accelerated track where we'll give you more support and we'll like promote you so that you can catch up to where you used to be. I think that's great. Like, it's wonderful that we have these kinds of support systems. Right now, we have a low matriculation rate for men into college. Where are the male-only scholarships? Right? So we as a society, when men have a problem, we tell them it's your problem to fix. Because this is something that's very important. We have to understand this. That when we talk to men, when we deal with men, there's a presumption of independence. There's a presumption of access to power, right? Which comes to a certain degree to the patriarchy. And everyone says the patriarchy harms both men and women. That's true. But no one actually like treats men in that way. I don't know if that makes sense. So you'll sort of say this kind of thing, but the money isn't where the mouth is. And this is where when we talk about men being more violent, yes, they are more violent. Now the question is, what are we going to do with that information? How are we going to address that? Are we going to say, hey, you just need to learn how to fix this on your own. You need to stop being violent, stop being a predator. We can say that, but it's not going to be effective. Or what we can try to do, and what I'm trying to do here today, is show people insight into the process through which anger and violence arise. And does this happen more in men than women? Absolutely. There are many reasons for that. One is that men are socialized. We did a whole lecture on this. But if you're experiencing a lot of anger, there's a good chance, if you're experiencing mostly anger, there's a good chance that there's a transmutation of emotions, of things like sadness, frustration, fear into anger. So if we go back to our, okay, maybe we'll take a look at a post. Right? And men are socialized to be angry. Okay, let's take a look at a post, actually. I'm the asshole in my story, and I don't know how to change. I'm like a weird middle-class version of Joffrey from Game of Thrones or Homelander from The Boys. If you're not familiar with them, they're characters known for their cruelty and lack of empathy. The difference is I wasn't raised to be this way. My parents did everything right, but somehow I turned out like this. My parents gave me everything they had. They always encouraged me to be kind and considerate, enrolling me in various activities and trying to teach me empathy. But even as a kid, I'd have these intense tantrums that went beyond normal childhood behavior. My mom is like a maid for the whole family, but I treat her like shit whenever I'm angry, not in the mood, or if something doesn't go my way. I go full Joffrey Homelander mode, taking out my temper on them. I don't know how I got this way. My dad's a bit of a dictator, and that's tolerable. My mom does all the heavy lifting at home, which might be why I'm such a spoiled brat. Everything's been handed to me on a silver platter. I've tried digging into my family history. I have aunts and uncles who never forgive people for minor misunderstandings. I have this tendency too, but mine is probably way worse. My mom and dad never exhibited these traits, so I'm not sure if I just made myself grow into a piece of shit or if I've inherited some of those bad traits from elsewhere of the family. Part of my weirdness comes from choosing to stay home instead of socializing. This has warped my sense of morality and justice. Once I calm down from my outbursts, the damage is already done. I feel bad, but my family just brushes it off like it never happened. Maybe if I'd faced more challenges in life, dealt with difficult people, or juggled multiple responsibilities, I'd be different and probably know how to control my anger. I first realized how problematic my behavior was in high school. A friend called me out on my attitude, and it hit me hard. But even though I recognized the issue, I struggled to change. It's affected every aspect of my life. I've lost my friends who couldn't handle my mood swings. At work, I'm known as the office hothead, which has definitely limited my career prospects. I've tried therapy and anger management, but I always quit after a few sessions. It's like I can't stand the idea of someone else telling me how to behave, and even when I know I need the help. I used to rage hard at multiplayer FPS games. I'd scream, I'd whine, and complain when I couldn't win. Once I got so angry that I punched a hole in my wall. After years of this toxic behavior, I realized I wasn't happy anymore. I switched to single-player RPGs to avoid the rage. As human beings, we should have more than one activity that brings us joy. Continually subjecting myself to anger and rage was destroying my well-being. I've had several girlfriends who all left me after seeing who I really am. My first girlfriend would always forgive me because I can't live without her, but once we got back together, I'd return to my old habits, never putting in effort and blaming her for our fights. I treated my ex-girlfriends the same way I treat my parents. When something doesn't go my way, I go apeshit and treat them like shit. Then the cycle repeats. What's even more disturbing is my use of the silent treatment. Even when I've calmed down and I know I should apologize, I can't bring myself to do it for days. There's a voice in my head telling me to make things right, but I just won't. During these periods, I feel constant tension in my chest like a rubber band stretched to its limit. One time, I gave my ex the silent treatment for a week because she forgot to buy my favorite snack at the grocery store. I knew it was ridiculous, but I couldn't stop myself. Eventually, I'd apologize, but it would be too late. We'd break up, and they'd find someone who treats them better. Any guy who doesn't treat them like shit is 10 times better than me. Okay? Because of who I am, I don't have deep connections with people, but that's probably because when they know the real me, I start acting differently. My negative vibes, weirdness, and tendency to put people in an uncomfortable situation have pushed everyone away. I know if they knew how I really am when I'm angry, they'd run away, unfriend me, and block me. That's why I bought my own house. Sometimes I have tantrums and message my family, but I try to remind myself that everything here is my own fault. There's no one else to blame but me. No one but my family and past relationships knows the full extent of who I am. Some people might have caught glimpses, but they haven't seen how truly angry I can be or get to where my tipping point really is. I'm terrified of what my future looks like if I can't get this under control. Will I end up completely alone? Will I ever be able to maintain a healthy relationship or advance my career? I know I'm not all bad. I can be funny and creative. I'm great with computers. I've been told I'm a good cook, but I don't know how to change. Such a great post. I know it's long. So anger really makes us feel out of control. Not just makes us feel out of control, makes us out of control. And sometimes we don't really know what the problem is, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we can look at our anger, we have insight into it, and then we sort of realize like, oh my God, like I can't control this, right? Like, what do I do? And this person has some insight, right? They'll sort of like look at themselves and they'll say, okay, like I've tried to go to therapy and anger management, but what is it? What do they say? Where's this part about? I've tried therapy and anger management, but I always quit after a few sessions. It's like I can't stand the idea of someone else telling me how to behave, even when I know I need help. So, how do you manage this? How do you understand if you're someone who gets so angry, sabotages your relationships, you've even tried to get help, but you can't stand help? What's going on? So there are a few important principles that we have to understand about how anger works. We're going to start with socialization. So when we move through the world and we relate to other people, the way that we relate to ourselves and the way that we relate to other people, which I know sounds like a weird phrase, how do you relate to yourself, has to do with what we're shown. So we have a mom who's subservient and a dad who's a dictator. So what is the social script? This person obeys. This person dictates. Right? So this is the script. So then what happens is like this person gets angry and yells at mom. And then mom falls into the script of saying, okay. Now, dictator, it seems like, is not regulating this behavior. So one of the reasons why we learn how to become incredibly angry is because our parents don't teach us the proper emotional regulation skills. Right? Now, why don't they teach us the proper emotional regulation skills? This is the script, but, and we'll get to this later, if the dictator does not get super angry all the time, we'll get to that in a second, they won't have learned these skills. So one of the most challenging things about being a parent is when you have a child whose brain is different from yours. So when I'm like, this is why it's like so hard to be a parent of a neuroatypical child. So I have a daughter who's probably neuroatypical, and I have a daughter who probably is neurotypical. And I'm a little bit neuroatypical. My wife is neurotypical. And so the really hard thing is if you have a child who has ADHD or is on the autism spectrum, or in the case of this person probably has some flavor of intermittent explosive disorder or oppositional defiant disorder or both. We'll get to those in a second. But the way that their brain responds to situations is just a ton of anger. But if your parents haven't had a brain that just gets really angry really quickly, they literally don't know how to teach you how to manage that anger because they have no idea. And this is the problem, right? Is what they'll do is the solutions they offer assumes the brain that they have. And this is why it's so hard to parent neuroatypical kids unless you're neuroatypical. Because the solutions that you come up with for the problems in your life presume the brain that you have. But if the brain that you have is different, then we don't know how to translate our solutions for that brain. Now, a really simple example of this is if I'm a parent who can see and I have a child who is blind, then obviously I can't teach them my solutions. I have to come up with a new set of solutions for my child. The problem with things like anger or people who are neurotypical, especially girls, because we don't realize that they have ADHD, is that the parent doesn't realize that you're blind. So they don't even realize that they need to do something else. They need to figure out a new solution for you. So then what happens is they go on trying to impose what works for them, which may have worked for their parents, right? And this person kind of says, my aunts and uncles are like this too, but my parents aren't. That's a really important piece of information. And then the solutions that your parents give you assume a brain that responds to moderate emotional regulation, doesn't need emotional like care and maintenance on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't work. Okay? Now, the good news is once you understand what, and this is the job of every parent, right, to understand the idiosyncrasies of your child. How is my child different? What really works for them? So I think the start of this, if you're someone who's struggling with anger and you don't know, like, how to get a control of yourself, the first thing you should look at is what is the social script? And then when you got angry with mom, was that behavior tolerated or not tolerated? And I'm not getting a whole lot of sense of intolerance of this behavior or the appropriate emotional regulation tools, which doesn't mean that the parents are at fault per se, because like they did the best that they could. But I think we still, like, just because we can diagnose a problem somewhere doesn't mean that it is anybody's fault. It's just the way things are. Okay? So what is the social script that you were taught? You were taught that you can be a dictator and that the person that you're dating, right, mom is obeys and is subservient, and dad dictates. So you're a dictator too. You fall into the dictator role, and so you like mimic this socialization. Second thing, the brain. Sometimes sometimes the reason that we get really angry is because our brain is itchy. What do I mean by an itchy brain? That means it takes very little stimulus to get a reaction. So we experience more intensity of anger. We have a lower threshold to trigger anger. And the duration of anger is longer. So there are certain things that we can do here in terms of emotional regulation techniques, doing things like meditation, frontal lobe training that will all help with these sorts of things. But your brain is different. That's okay. You can train it up. But it gets more complicated. I want to highlight this relationship. Now, where's this relationship? So, my first girlfriend would always forgive me because I can't live without her. But once we got back together, I'd return to my old habits, never putting in effort and blaming her for our fights. So sometimes when we have this social script of one person is subservient and one person is a dictator, one of the worst things that we can ever do is find someone who has the same script. So here's the angry person. Here's the person who receives the blame taker, and the blame giver. Right? So the girlfriend that you picked feels some degree of guilt. Oh, I can't live without you. And then they derive some kind of ego benefit from martyrdom because I have low self-esteem. Since I don't feel good about myself, the more that I martyr myself, the more that I put up with your abuse. You're abusing me so hard, you're getting angry at me, you never change. I'm not going to give up on you because that's not what I do. It's love forever, till death do us part. So heap it on me, heap it on me. Go ahead, be as mean as you want to. I will never, ever abandon you. And the more that you heap it on me and the less that I abandon you, the more of a saint I become. So now y'all are both acting out parts of a play. Never going to get better. That's not how we heal. It's how we find harmony. Absolutely. And this is why sometimes I think the worst thing that you can do is look for a relationship where you're very harmonious. Y'all just fit together like gloves. Oh my God. Terrible relationship to find is one where y'all fit together like gloves, because that means the particular socialization, the particular ways that you're screwed up and the particular ways that they're screwed up fit together. That's not a good thing, because now y'all will just reenact the problems of the generations above. We want conflict in a relationship. We want there to be a growing of the two people. Right? There should be tension. There should be conflict. And that's the cool thing. When there is tension and conflict, that's when we have to change. And as you change, you become a new person. And they become a new person. And now the growing on both of your ends, if it happens in the positive direction, results in a relationship that is like new and is really designed for the two of you. Really confusing. The other thing is that one thing that I think is really dumb, people will say, like, when you're trying to find a partner, okay, this really